What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of my HLTV Fantasy. Today we are looking at IEM Dallas 2024 playoffs. I will first show how I did in the group stage. Pretty well. Top 8% gives me 15 points in the leaderboard, which is amazing. Mouse didn't do as well as I expected. Of course, very disappointing for them to not make it through to the playoffs. But luckily, Brolan was one of the highest rated players of the group stage. Same with Magix, who really delivered for me. I think it's mostly because of Brolan and Magic's picks that I get this top 8% instead of something way worse if I picked some of the worst players from these teams, because a lot of people went for double spirit, double mouse. Chopper also doing really well for his price. Messi doing okay, but the real disappointment here is that I had Teses in his slot before I changed it because of Dexter missing out after visa issues. So I would be probably at least top 5% if I had Teses in that slot, because he was actually, I believe, the highest rated player in the group stage. Chewy, of course, very big disappointment, but that's to be expected when you have the IGL of a team that doesn't make it through. But yeah, with this result of getting 15 points, we are actually inside the top 100 for the first time this season. And I expect there to be, I would say 2 to 3, actually 3 to 4, I would say 2 to 4 maybe events left this season that will count towards the season leaderboard. So there's definitely a chance to get this top 10%, and even the gap between like top 10 and top 3 is pretty slight still. So who knows? If we get really good results, it's possible. So let's get right into it. Let's take a look at this playoffs bracket and see what we expect. FaZe G2, FaZe has to be favored on this upper side either way. Like G2 is still playing with Stewie2K, who's played pretty bad. Monesi really carrying. They did better than I expected in this group in this tournament, but like Stewie, as I kind of expected, didn't do very well. FaZe, classic FaZe, like they lost to Spirit only in groups, which is a bit better than I from them than I expected. I did think that M80 might beat them, but they were pretty dominant in that, and then of course against VP it's always going to be slightly tighter. But you know, we all know what playoffs FaZe is capable of. I would expect them to beat G2, especially with a stand-in. I think FaZe is the kind of team that doesn't lose to stand-in situations as often. And then 9Z, honestly, very impressed by them. They actually won their group. They beat teams like Mouse, Liquid, and Vitality to make it to the semis, which is not a small feat at all. Like, beating Mouse is great. Then they ride that hype into a game against Liquid, which is like, I mean, we all know that Liquid are having some big issues right now, but still, it's still impressive against individuals like Naf and Twists, especially on the team of Liquid. And then Vitality with like Zaiwu, Spinks even showing up, but they just were able to neutralize their opponents well enough to actually win this. So upper side of the bracket, I think it's a double FaZe angle. I can't see anything that would make me feel otherwise, though. Like, even with 9Z playing this well, I still think FaZe in playoffs of a big tournament is gonna show up every time, and against this opposition, I don't see how they don't make it to the finals. Lower side of the bracket, a bit more competitive, I would say. Vitality versus Heroic could go kind of either way. Like, Heroic were a lot better than I expected in that lower side with Nikodos. I think the firepower of Vitality has to be strong enough to beat them. Like, just as long as Zaiwu plays to his standards, Spinks plays well, FlameZ plays well, Apex has been showing up very well for his team lately, and then Messi, as long as he is not like a big liability, I do think Vitality has to make it through. But I don't think either of those teams are gonna beat Spirit. I do think Spirit is essentially building up from Betboom Dasha. So in Dasha, they didn't win the event. They only got to the finals, and it felt like a disappointment for them because their expectations are insane. Spirit went very cleanly through this. So they 13-1 FlyQuest, which is not honestly a bad team. Then they destroy Na'Vi, and then they beat FaZe. Like, all of these results are really impressive. And I just think this event, they're gonna also go probably the whole way and just win the event. I think that's probably a very likely outcome here. So in terms of fantasy then, most picked players, we have Chopper, Zontix, Magix from Spirit, we have Carrigan, Rain, Frozen from FaZe, so a lot of people thinking the same as me, that some combination of players from these two teams is probably gonna be the best, and I would definitely agree with that. I think picking Flames, so how expensive is Flames? 202k, I think, like, if you want to go for the Vitality angle, that Vitality, after beating Heroic, do actually beat Spirit. I don't see why you wouldn't go for Flames. That's a very fair price for him. Stewie 2k still, I mean, honestly, you are trolling if you pick him. I believe I tweeted before the event that I think he's going to be a liability for them. I think it's a bad pick to make. I don't know how many points he got based on roles and such and boosters, but I know his rating wasn't good. And that's the main point. And I think it's going to be even worse after G2 gets beaten by FaZe. But if you want to go for a donk lineup, you might have to go for cheaper guys like him. Although, like, look, Stewie isn't even that cheap. Like 180, this was the number one problem. Like, if he was 165k, 170k, yeah, you probably pick him just to make up money for some of the more expensive other guys, but for that price, I think it's too expensive. So when I was looking at FaZe, in terms of who I would like to pick, I think honestly everyone is at a decent price. Like, these prices are very affordable. Brokey has been a demon in playoffs lately, so he might very well just be the best player in the playoffs altogether. I don't hate any team with Brokey. Rops is probably my least favorite pick out of FaZe, to be honest, like, based off price, just because of how he has slightly fallen off his first form in CS2, especially after Frozen comes in. And Frozen is honestly, at this price for this rating, he's supposed to be the star rifler of this team, and he is the star rifler of this team for 209k. I think it's just a pretty big no-brainer, and there's a reason why he's also the third most picked FaZe player. Rain and Carrigan, the more budget options. I think Rain is who I would prefer to go for. Carrigan in playoffs usually doesn't have the craziest stats. Of course, you're getting FaZe for 183k, which is nice to have, but I think Rain has way higher potential upside. Then Spirit is the other team. I'm going with a double up. So who do I like the most? I think Donk is... I would love to have Donk, but it's just way too hard to make work in terms of money in playing around, and all of the teams have some very questionable picks. That's often gonna be the case when there's a low amount of teams. There's just less options, and when there's less options, usually the cheaper options are also gonna be worse. Also, Donk is currently playing his second worst event with still 1.2 something rating. So he's still playing insanely well, but he's not, I think, playing up to the level demanded of this price. Chiro, I would probably not go for with this price. I'm just not that convinced. I don't think I want to make concessions around the team, especially with the rest of the team playing so well lately. Like, all of these guys are so much cheaper and have potential to get similar ratings, because Spirit is often crushing their opponents right now. I don't see why they couldn't crush Vitality or Heroic in the first game at least. And that's a really good potential for high points totals for these cheaper players as well. So Magic, Zontix, Chopper are then the kinds of players I would be looking at. In terms of a cheap fifth fill, in terms of how I like to theorize my team picking, it would have to be either a cheap player from Vitality, because I expect them to beat Heroic, or if I want to gamble, I could go for a cheap player from Heroic, and then hope that they don't get so crushed by Spirit that you end up with high negative points. The other option is to go for a cheap 9Z player who's gonna get padding and I hope is not gonna get super crushed by FaZe. And honestly, for this event, I think it's gonna be the 9Z angle. Like, they're getting... First of all, I'm not that confident that Vitality is gonna beat Heroic or the other way around. So I don't want to pick one of those. And then 9Z actually has a decent budget option that's gonna allow me to make a really nice team around him. I think like his stats personally, this event and generally have just been okay. I mean, he crushed Mouse, and then he was a bit worse against the other teams, but still not like disastrously bad. And his team was winning, you know, so like, who cares? But like, if he produces even on one of the maps against FaZe something like these maps, even if they lose, and I'm expecting them to lose against FaZe, but they probably could put up a fight with the way they've been playing. He's just very worth it. And on top of that, this price is just it. He's gonna get padding, and I can put like a noob roll on him because I expect him to still get at least sub 1.0 rating against FaZe. And if he doesn't, I've like gotten the best budget option anyways. So who do I then build around this? Out of FaZe, I think these two guys are the ones I want to go for. You could go for a Carrigan draft, and then you could maybe go for a Brokey and some of the other players on Spirit. But honestly, this just allows me to still go for Chopper and Zontix. This team just looks so solid to me. I don't know why I would make any changes. Like, Magic's had a great event this far, but I think his role is just such that he's often not gonna actually get the highest rating on the team. Like, I think even Chopper sometimes can be more put up to the task of getting high ratings. At least getting high fragging. Like, if he's feeling it, he can actually outfrag Magic's quite easily. Zontix, I do think, is just a solid player. He kind of choked in the playoffs of the major, but that's a while back, and this is not a major. This is just a IEM event. I think this is just the lineup. Like, there's other things you could do. You could go Carrigan, and then you can go like Shiro, Chopper. That's something you could do. You could go Carrigan with Brokey. I would probably prefer Brokey, but the price difference is maybe slightly too high. And then you can go like Zontix and Magix. I think this is very decent if you feel like Brokey is gonna be really good. If you wanna gamble on Magix more, this is just slightly too expensive for Magix to my taste. If it was, I believe in groups he was like 202k, then we might be talking about Magix a bit more. But here, like, $2,000 difference between Zontix and Magix, I think Zontix is just the better pick. Because I don't want to have this video be too short, I'll go over some other thoughts about other teams. So, like, if you go Vitality, I think Apex is someone I would love to have. I don't think Messi is the kind of player who's going to show up in playoffs. I might try and make a Zaiwu lineup, but like 5k difference between Zaiwu and Donk, I would rather have Donk. Flamesy Apex is probably my double up for Vitality here if I can choose two players, best value for money. For G2, I wouldn't go there. I just wouldn't like, they're gonna look, I mean, they might beat FaZe, but it would then have to be a m0NESY lineup, I think. m0NESY and try and probably play with like an X. I wouldn't like to have, maybe Hunter. Can afford it, but it's tough because the prices are so weird, and the expected fragging for someone like Nex, I think, is, or Stewie especially, is I think pretty low. Heroic, I was kind of looking at Kixan at one point as my like fill player instead of Buddha. Like, I believe you can actually just make the same lineup as what I had earlier. Chopper Zontix, and you can just have Kixan. Like, if you believe in the Heroic upset over Vitality and still don't believe in in Spirit losing their semi, I think this is probably the team. And then Kixan, because he's a capable fragger. You're gonna get those winning points, 6 points from the first game, and you might be in luck. It's a difference of 2k between in the prices. I think why I prefer Buddha is just for the fact that he's guaranteed those 6 padding points. And I think there's a lower risk with Buddha, I would say, in general. Otherwise, from Heroic, I guess Tesses is the kind of player I would go for. Shush, Nerds, Kixan. I wouldn't go for Nikodos, I don't think. But everyone else, I'm pretty happy to pick. And if you are a degenerate gambler and really believe that 9Z is gonna continue this dream run, just go for the most expensive players, honestly. Probably like DGT, Martinez, Quaso Peak was looking decent, I think, here. Yeah, just go with your gut if you want to go for 9Z. But yeah, for me the team is Rain, Frozen. I'll put Buddha in the middle just for the heck of it, and Zontix. Then this also works pretty well in terms of roles, so I think Noob is the role to go for Buddha. Like, I think he's only gonna play one game. I don't expect him to go 0.5, but I think it's the safest. Like, I don't think he's gonna go 1.12 or above, definitely. I definitely don't think that. I think it's a pretty safe 2-pointer, and sometimes 5-pointer. If it's a 5-pointer, it's not the end of the world either, because we're getting those 6 padding points at the very least. Headshot for Rain, completely obvious. I would say Zontix with support is the best. Yup. Or IGL if you want to go for that, but I don't think that's the one. I could go IGL here as well, but I think eco-friendly is the one I want to go for. It's just such a good role for Chopper. And this is the difficult one. It ain't entry, it's not camper. It could be multifragger. 3144. But I'm actually thinking of like attacker, multifragger, or leader. So those are the options, I would say. You could go leader on Frozen if you think base beats G2 2-0. If you think 9Z is beaten 2-0, that's 10 points. If you lose in the spirit, it's 8 points. It could be any of these as the best one. It's a bit tough. This is the least risky, I guess. Like, you're almost always getting 2-pointers in terms of this percentage. There's nothing better in the other roles either. I think I would like to go for multifragger here. I think it's better on average. I think there's just too high a chance of like some of these maps being, or matches being 2-1s and then losing in the final, and that's then gonna be negative points for the role. Whereas I think multifragger is more safe. Boosters, first round, it's all best of 3, of course, in playoffs. We don't have IGL, so I don't know what is the best. Oh, we actually only get to use what, 2, 4, 6, 12, 13 boosters. So we need to actually look at which 5 boosters we don't use. Okay, I think that's actually something I'll do off screen then. Guess that's actually gonna require some calculating, and I don't think you're gonna enjoy hearing me ramble about that at all. I've done it in some other videos before. It's essentially just math and calculating which the 5 worst boosters are, and then which are the best boosters for each player, and then taking out the 5 worst boosters total. But yeah, if you enjoy this kind of content, please remember to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.